Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first podcast of the 2025 D2 football season. I am Chuck Bittner along with Matt Witwicky. This is a special edition of Inside D2 Football. Witt and I are here to walk you through the 2025 Elite 100 watch list. So, Witt, before we jump into that, first of all, my friend, welcome back to Division II football. We are just weeks away from the start of the season. Are you getting excited? Are you getting in shape? Do you have your conditioning routine down?
Well, I mean, I taped my ankles up just for this segment, Chuck. So, and they're already swelling up before we're done, I'm sure. But yeah, this is a really exciting time of year, and I'm really looking forward to it. During the course of coming up with our Elite 100 list, it kind of got a little bit of that flavor going, and now you see media days and things like that. Chuck, you've been updating those for our site and kind of keeping everything current there, and it just kind of feels like we're getting real close, especially with the week 0 competition.
It's here. The teams that are participating in week 0 are already in camp. I think almost everybody else that hasn't already reported is probably doing so this weekend. So it is here. So Witt, before we start going through the Elite 100 watch list team, take a minute or two and just explain what the Elite 100 is, kind of the genesis of that, and what people can expect to see as we unveil these player names.
Yeah, after COVID, Brandon Meisner and I, our founder, talked about how can we kind of make this, our All-American team, whether it's preseason or postseason, kind of stand out a little bit more, a little bit different. And we decided that we're going to brand it our Elite 100 team because we kind of felt that that was a really fitting way to describe the guys that we were going to land on this, on this grouping. So it's changed a little bit since that time. I'm going to be real frank with you with the portal movement and sometimes having limited information based on player availability. Some teams don't even have their roster posted yet for this season. It has become a bit of a challenge. So we have done the best we can to accumulate what we think are the top 100 players in Division II heading on into the 2025 campaign. Now, we will have, Chuck, a first and second team that will be offense and defense both. That will they're not playing both ways, but we'll have each. And I mean, maybe they could. I hadn't thought about that, but then that'll take up about 50 spots, Chuck, of the 100. Then we will have what we call our squad members, which will, essentially be the next 25 offensive players and defensive players on that list. We don't show a whole lot of favor to first, second team, or squad. We consider them all the Elite 100 group. So that's kind of our viewpoint on this.
All right, and let's remember this is the watch list, so the big honors come at the end of the season. But very happy that we can recognize these players who have earned it and who deserve it. And along the lines of recognition, I do really want to brag on my good friend here, Witt. He spent a tremendous amount of time and energy vetting out all the players, and also a lot of that went into just confirming, are these players still at the school we think that they're at? And Witt, I know you spend a lot of time not just evaluating players, but talking to coaches of those players, talking to some of the coaches in those conferences to really try to get a good read on the most impactful players. So on behalf of our team at d2football.com, really want to thank you and recognize you for the amount of work that you put into to recognizing these players.
Well, and Chuck, I need to make sure I also mention that a guy that I kind of partner with on this, which is our small college football scout, Josh Buchanan, who does work for other publications as well. But he plays a great hand in letting us know a little bit also more, Chuck, about who are some of the NFL scouts really, zeroing in on the most as well. So interesting list that we have coming up here. And it's one of those things where we accumulate it with a lot of different sources, and then we'll also do this, as Chuck referred to, in the postseason, to really land on our final one at the end of 2025.
Right, and some of the player movement goes right down to camp, so it is still possible that you'll see a player name associated with a program, and these no longer there. If that happened, it was unavoidable, and I know that we did everything we could to make sure we were as accurate as possible. But this is not about you or me or anybody else but the 100 players who made the list. So let's shine the spotlight on our D2 players. Let's start with our first team offense. And let's start on kind of the skill position group. Witt, I thought when we looked at some of the quarterbacks that graduated or transferred out of Division II at the end of last season, there might be a pretty significant talent drop-off. But I think you're going to see as we work through this, it was still very difficult to arrive at the quarterbacks who were going to make this list. Talk a little bit about our first teamer, Jack Strand from Minnesota State Moorhead.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that because we lose guys like Zach Zabrowski, Trinidad Chambliss, guys who really got a lot of spotlight last year, Chuck. Jack Strand is only thrown for about 10,000 yards in his 3 years at Minnesota State Moorhead, including wins over teams like Augustana, Duluth. Really has raised the profile of their program there. Now, at the same time, he averages for his career, Chuck. He's been starting since he was a freshman. He averages over 300 yards passing a game. That shows you quite a bit in itself. Then, furthermore, I've had discussions up here where I'm at, in the Dakotas, that I have South Dakota State, I have North Dakota State, I have a bunch of FCS programs up here. The consensus or thought is that Jack Strand's the best quarterback up in this area, no matter what class. So that says a whole lot about how he's thought of, in the football circles. But as we move along after Jack, we've got a lot of other names here that we're going to highlight as well. One that doesn't get quite as much shine as maybe some of the others over the years. Ronald Blackman at Tiffin is the top returning rusher in Division II. He had over 1,400 yards a season ago, scored 13 times. He's a guy for a Tiffin squad that I think is going to be right around a top 25, squad all season. Then as I go ahead and I kind of look further on the page, we've got in our first group, we got a nice combination here. We got a speedster like, Rashawn Bradford at Bentley, who had a monster season for them, a year ago. I've got guys like Flynn Sheely, who had a terrific season last year, really came on. And then we've got, Reggie Ratzlaff, who is, we had 2 Harlan Hill finalists of our 8 that were there a year ago. And Retzlaff is one of those guys. And he's from, CSU Pueblo. Now, he's going to be a favorite for the Harlan Hill Award coming into this year. But if we take a look at this in totality here, it's still a little bit up in the air if he's going to compete this fall. They are hoping that he gets granted another campaign, for their star wideout at Pueblo, because let's be honest, he would be right up there in the mix for Harlan Hill, right at the top. That hasn't been fully determined yet. We're going to give him benefit of the doubt and land him on our squad here. We'll see how things play out on that. And, Chuck, as I look to the other side of our graphic here, got a really interesting
We're not
group.
lacking size here on the offensive line, are we?
No.
I've always thought over the years, if there's a position group where I really like to see upperclassmen, seniors and graduate players, it's in the offensive line. These guys who've been in college weight training programs for 4 years, 5 years, guys who've been really honing the craft over a long period of time. This is a very experienced group that we have. And when we talk about pro prospects, it's possible that through this entire group, the top 2 pro prospects as we start the season are in this offensive line group.
They are. Nick Walker and Joe Cooper, Ashland and Slippery Rock, respectively, are right at that top of the list where there's a real chance that those guys could get drafted next year. Now, in addition to that, we have my guy that I love saying his name, Bruno Anwazo. I got it again, Chuck. Stuck it again. He is 6'8", 320. He looks different coming off the bus. Then we actually have 2 centers in this group who we think will probably battle it out for the Remington Award. And we've got, Slade Edwards at Central Washington and Montreal Lee, who's at Central Oak, who was voted the top offensive lineman in the MIAA a season ago. So a heck of a group to kind of start off our All-American team.
I think Jack Strand would be very safe behind this group, playing in this offensive unit. So let's take a look now at our first team defense. And I guess we have to start with our 2024 Elite 100 Defensive Player of the Year, Ricky Freeman from Western Colorado.
Yeah, he makes that pretty easy with 24 tackles for loss a season ago, leading all of Division II. The fact that he's coming back like this, and let's be honest, it's not that he was probably short of any offers at the D1 level, but he's decided he's going to finish on out here. And Chuck, I think you can make a case for if a guy ends up finishing out his career as a superstar at our level, he probably puts himself in as good or better position than if you try and move on up to other levels and try your hand at things at times. So I think it was an interesting move by him. But a guy that I want to mention right on his heels, Chris Walton from Tiffin, guy who had 18 tackles for loss a season ago himself, really athletic guy on the end. Also a guy who was a wrestler at Newberry before he came on over. Chuck, you got to always, any defensive coach you ask him, he'll take a wrestler all day long. So
No doubt.
then as we kind of move through our list, Jack Puckett down at the bottom left of our graphic here from Central Oklahoma has really come on and become kind of a household name as that program continues to elevate. I think you're going to see more of him in the middle of their defense. Along with, as we go ahead and kind of take a look left to right, for folks who follow the national scene real close, Harding's Clark Griffin is a guy who's 5'9", 185, plays backer. He only leads them in tackles by a long shot on the best defense last year in Division II. I don't see them taking a step back defensively this year. He originally was going to be done playing. He found out that he could continue to, and it's good to see him back. And along with, I'm going to highlight another guy here, Tristan Exline from UTPB. Last year, Chuck, they were not really the high-flying team that they were a season before that. And they had an underrated defense, and he led them in that group. And, clearly worth being on our first team.
Absolutely. Yeah, a couple of years ago when Harding had the best defense in Division II football, won the national championship, they had all kinds of players that earned postseason honors. I had a couple people in my ear telling me that Clark Griffin was the best defensive player on that team. So he is a first teamer. And I'll mention a couple other names. Freddie Rudder, defensive lineman from Kutztown. He was the PSAC East Defensive Player of the Year. I got to see him a couple times in person last year. Very explosive football player. And there's some school names out here that fans would be very familiar with over the years. Harding, Pittsburgh State, CSU Pueblo, Western Colorado. Nice to see a player from Emory and Henry, still one of our newer programs in D2. To have a player honored at this level as well. So that is our first team defense.
Yeah, and you know what, Chuck, you bring up a good point. As I'm about to move to our next group, this is not just an accumulation of the best players who are top 25, on top 25 teams. You're going to see a mix of guys from a lot of different schools within this because we feel they're rewarding.
All right, on to our second team offense. And then we'll go through our second team defense. Starting with the quarterback position, Witt, I think this was probably a pretty tough call to go. I think this could have gone a lot of different ways. We landed on Drew Nash from Western Colorado as our second team quarterback.
Yeah, some people will say, okay, why don't you have a Jet Huff from Central Oklahoma or some other guys who maybe have a little bit bigger numbers? When I take a look at Drew Nash, we need to also be able to consider how good is the football team? Were they winning playoff games? I thought Drew Nash personally took a step forward last year, Chuck, when they were able to go ahead and beat Mines, a game that that was kind of a hurdle they hadn't gone over yet. In a stretch there last year, they against his rivals, which obviously are Pueblo and Mines, he threw for over 600 yards in those two games total with 7 scores. That's stepping up in those big moments. We feel that he is, and he also can run the football. Sometimes he's kind of like their sneaky best rusher. Chuck, there's times where
Yeah.
all of a sudden you find out, in a big game, who was their leading rusher is Drew Nash.
Yeah.
So this guy can do a little bit of everything, and I think he's deserving to be up this high. Now, some of the other names that kind of catch my eye in the graphic there, we have Corey Harris from UTPB. He has just been a very steady player for them over the last few years. Was over 1,000 yards a season ago, in a year where they didn't have the best offense. They had a changeover at quarterback. He was a steady factor for them. In addition to that, as we kind of take a look through some of the other names that we have, Armon Harris at Clark, undersized guy, but you know what? Over 1,000-yard receiver. It looked like he was actually going to head on over to Johnson C. Smith, and then he's back with Clark as of the beginning of August. He's a heck of a weapon for them, and his quarterback, we may even talk about a little bit later. They're going to make,
Absolutely.
for another interesting pairing this year.
Absolutely. And he is a great player. Also, just want to mention apologies to Clark Atlanta. We had a little bit of a copy paste there in the graphic. We know it's Clark Atlanta University. So apologies to the Panthers for a little bit of an error on the graphic, but very much a program that's on the rise in the SIAC, as you mentioned, Witt. Probably some other players that we're going to see there mentioned as well. Kyron Curget, the running back from Seton Hill, another program that we historically haven't been able to talk about a whole lot on the program. I got to see him last year. Very explosive running back, but just deceptively strong too. Very powerful runner, kind of a complete package, and kind of has that perfect size, about 5'10", 200. So definitely a player to watch for in SR1.
And you know what, Chuck? He ended up finishing top 5 nationally last year. And since he wasn't on one of those top teams, sometimes doesn't get the love.
And in the offensive line group, Witt, again, some pretty well-established programs represented there. And again, certainly size, no issue, and a lot of upperclassmen again in this group. Yeah,
so one of the people I really want to highlight here, we haven't talked about Ferris State yet. National champion, right? Jarvis Wyndham is their top returning offensive lineman. He's also a center. And, they lost a few guys to going to Big Ten level football, essentially, 2 of their linemen. But I don't expect Ferris State to take a step back on that offensive line. I think they're going to reload, and he's going to be the leader of that group. And, a lot of people talk about how Ferris State has success. It's really the offensive line that drives that for them year after year. And we think that he's deserving to be second team. And we also have a fellow GLIAC player with Brett Weaver there as well from Grand Valley, the top offensive lineman from that squad. Those two are always going to have big contests between them. And, we decided to go ahead and land both of those guys here on our second team.
All right. So there's a look at our second team offense. Witt, let's go on to our second team defense. And let's start in the backfield this time as we go through the list here. Tell me about some of the players here in our defensive backfield.
Well, it's funny, Chuck, because you mentioned the PSAC a moment ago. We've got some guys here that I want to talk about from the PSAC. We've got David Uwa. Now, David Uwa is an interesting situation. He was at Seton Hill, Chuck, and is now moving on over to IUP. Now, with that, IUP, this may be me giving away a little bit, Chuck, of where I think IUPs may go this year, but I kind of like their trajectory as we come into this season. He's one of those reasons why, but then we also take a look at another top PSAC defender, Everett Dingle at East Stroudsburg. A defense last year, Chuck, that was, top 25 nationally, and he was their top defender from that group. So I take a look. Those two are kind of the guys that highlighted for me right away. Then, Chuck, with this group, the first group we had a 4-3 defense. On our second team, we've got a 3-4, and I think the 3-4 is really highlighted here by this group of backers. You talk about the PSAC, we've got Connor Noble, over 100 tackles last year for Westchester, 6'1", 240. That's a pretty good size backer. Then we've got Carter Edwards, who was at Northwest Missouri State. They were still a top 25 defense last year. their tradition defensively doesn't sleep. Now, as we take a look a little further, Anthony Cardamone, if you've been watching our programming at all for the last few years, you've heard that name plenty. And then Jake Adams, I should say, from Northern State, 150 stops last year for their squad on a defense that started to really improve as the year went on. Now, one player that I haven't mentioned on this slide is Marcus Hansen in the top left corner, Chuck, of our graphic. There's going to be people who are going to tune in and say, wait a second, isn't he supposed to be on Bemidji? Or didn't he transfer to Harding? Well, yes, but now he's at Minnesota State. And you take a look at Minnesota State and the 4-3 defense they play. That was a team that was a semifinalist a year ago, Chuck. Feels almost like a case of the rich getting richer there a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like he can be a real difference maker on that Mavericks defensive line. So that is our second team defense. So Witt, as we progress through this, let's take a look at special teams. We'll do first and second team here together. Brandon Perez, our first team kicker, was perfect last year in 2025. Perfect 10 for 10. More than half of those over 40 yards, had a season long of 54. So he is our first team kicker. Witt, this team would not be complete without Braden Jay. You always have to find a place for him. You know, when you look at the variation of the touches he gets, whether it's rushing, receiving, punt returns, kick returns, some of those individually don't jump off the page enough for him to really advance as, you know, one of the real standout players. But we know when you add all that up, he really is one of the most electrifying players in Division II.
I think that you could make a case that he is the most electric player in Division II. Chuck, he doesn't touch the ball that often. I mean, he had a time last year where he was averaging over 10 yards per touch. Think about that. Now, because of the style that they play, where so much of it is going to be, you know, between the tackles and going ahead and running our dive and things like that, when they choose to use him, it's kind of like, you know, it's almost like they've been doing body blows the whole game, and all of a sudden we got a headshot because he is just so elusive on the end. There was very few teams that were able to slow him down a season ago. There's going to be people who see this graphic and say, he's still there. Yeah, he is. And, you know, he's over 1,000 yards a season ago. Excited to see what he can do this season.
All right. So that is a look at our first and second team special teams. So Witt, we've gotten through first and second teams. Let's move on to our squad players, and we'll do this just offense and defense. Whole bunch of names for us to recognize here. So Witt, I'm just going to kind of tee this up for you. Maybe we'll kind of go position group by position group. You know, when I look at those names at the quarterback position, a couple things. There's some names that we have been reading and talking about for a very long time. Yeah, I think my name would go to Braden Fuller first as a Harlan Hill finalist a year ago, but some of the others that really jump out. I mean, Gavin Sukup, again, talking about a player that feels like he's been around a long time, coming back at UIndy once again. You know, probably one of the best pure passers in Division II. And David Wright, someone who, you know, just excelled at Allen before he followed his coach to Clark Atlanta. You know, again, just a player that consistently puts up big productivity in that offensive unit. Kyle Waljasper, I know he's kind of up there in your home conference in the NSIC. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's essentially a linebacker playing quarterback. No, I mean, when you see him coming around on a keeper, it's there's guys on the other side making business decisions at times. He is a big fella coming on through. And he is a dual threat for them. He's able to throw the ball well. You know, to his defense, Chuck, he played last year coming off of a shoulder surgery and wasn't really himself and still had a monster year. Well, you know, you can take a look on this list here. He's also got Deshaun Adams, his top wideout, returning. So you combine that with the fact that Waljasper is able to, he's the kind of guy he can be 1,000-yard rusher. He is a different type of dual threat. So definitely a guy worth watching anytime, you know, Minnesota Duluth is on. But a guy that I want to mention that you kind of alluded to, David Wright, top 5 in total offense a season ago. Now, there's times where he may also throw the ball to the other team a little bit. But you know what? He's not the only guy on that list who sometimes has that. But David has, I think, really come on year to year and look better each season. I'm curious and anxious to see how he does this year. Is they're going to have some more high profile games early in the year?
Absolutely. Moving on to our running back group, LG Turner, a little bit of that roundabout route to LR, but certainly one of the standout performers in the sack a year ago. And then Andrew Miller also really had a breakout season a year ago at Harding.
Yeah. And Chuck, you made kind of a reference to some of these guys are not on teams that we talk about all that frequently. Hunter Patterson at West Liberty would be a perfect example of that. He's a sprinter on the track team, probably the most athletic guy in this grouping. Some people may kind of pull their head back on that, but you know what? We'll go with that. He's a sprinter on the track team who is the kind of guy who is able to break big plays. And I'm curious to see how he progresses this year. He is getting attention from some NFL squads. So he's another one of those guys that we need to kind of keep an eye on, from a scouting standpoint. Denham Cook at, Truman State, 5'9", 235, Chuck. Kind of reminds you a little bit of a guy that was at Charleston a season ago. The kind of back who is, kind of got a little bit more of that bowling ball look coming through. So we've got an interesting group here. Last guy I'm going to mention, Jaden Sullins. Carson Newman, Chuck, who saw that coming last year, making the playoffs and for them to get that option offense going the way they did. Jaden Sullins is the biggest weapon in that right now. So I'm curious to see, can Carson Newman repeat the kind of success and him as well that they did a year ago.
In the receiving group, we haven't seen a ton of West Florida representation in this list yet. West Florida Argos is getting a lot of love here in the offseason. I think we'll see as the top 25 polls continue to be revealed. I think there's going to be some respect shown to the Argos and what their potential is this year. Corey Scott, one of their top wide receiving prospects, returning.
Yeah, and Corey's the guy that we have in the graphic right there. Had some big games in some of those, those Saturday evening contests that they tend to play in. Younger player that is, I think, really going to come on for them. You started to see, Chuck, that it was a very young football team a season ago, especially offensively. I think that you're going to see them kind of step up, and I think he's going to be at the forefront of that. Now, as we take a look at some of the other names, I want to highlight Maurice Massey on IUP. Now, he has got a new weapon that's come on over to IUP with to join him, and that's Findlay quarterback Matthew Reevy, who was a star player a season ago, who transferred from Boston College originally. 6'4" quarterback who can sling it. Chuck, don't be surprised if Maurice Massey becomes his kind of main target. I seem to be highlighting IUP a little bit here, Chuck. I'm kind of hinting at something. And I think that we're going to see them have a little bit of a resurgence.
All right. And Cameron Woods, tight end from Northeastern State. I thought with the Riverhawks really showed a major step forward in competitive form last year. Very excited to see what they can do in season 2 under their coaching staff, and also season 2 as an independent, not necessarily playing a full MIAA schedule. So nice to see the Riverhawks represented on a list like this. And when we move into our offensive line group, I know there's some players here getting some preseason recognition. Ryan Butts was on the Shrine Bowl watch list, which is a big honor. And tell us about some of the other offensive linemen that we have here.
Yeah, when I take a look at this group here, a guy I want to highlight, Dylan Horton from Wichita Baptist. We have not mentioned anyone from them up until this point because they've lost some of their offensive firepower. Whether it's at running back, receiver, even in their defensive back room. So Dylan's the first guy that we're mentioning from that squad. A team was always able to run the football really well. Also, I want to highlight Drew Daniels, one of the top offensive linemen in the MIAA for Pitt State. He's another guy, that's on a squad, Chuck, that's frankly going to play some real high-profile games right away when we start this year.
No doubt. No doubt. So there's a look at our squad offense. That'll round out the offensive representation in the Elite 100 list. Witt, let's close this out by looking at the squad defense. Man, as I scroll through the list of names there, that defensive front, when I look at the defensive line and the linebackers, a lot of talent in that group. I had mentioned West Florida a few minutes ago that we hadn't seen a lot of representation yet. 2 players in the defensive line here on the squad defense. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah. So first off, Kai Russell is a guy that didn't get all the headlines. He played with a star player from the years past. He only had 12 tackles for loss a season ago for a Wingate defense that's been top 5 for the last few seasons. So they're a squad always to watch, really on that defensive side, especially. When I take a look at some of the rest of the list, Byron Puryear was the preseason defensive player of the year for the Gulf South the season ago. He got hurt, Chuck, against Grand Valley, probably returning that fumble for a touchdown. He brought one back. But as we're taking a look at West Florida, he comes back. Colin Shaw had a big season while he was gone. And they also got a transfer D lineman from Newberry to add to the mix, an all-conference player. I think we start to look at a little bit, Chuck, of why you mentioned earlier that there's a little bit of a buzz around West Florida coming into this year, despite the fact they didn't make the postseason a year ago. And when I start taking a look at who may have the best defensive front in Division II, West Florida is maybe the first team that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, no doubt. Moving into the linebacker group, again, a pretty deep group here. Witt, a couple programs. Again, it's fun for us to be able to represent some players and some teams that we don't get to talk about a whole lot. I see representation here from Mary. Good to see the Marauders checking in. Also Hillsdale, and also Bentley from the Northeast 10. So tell us a little bit about some of those players.
Henry Schouten from Bentley, fantastic player. Over 100 tackles a season ago, over 13 tackles for loss. Kind of a be everywhere defender for a Bentley team that's always in the playoff mix, Chuck. Now, they're not always a team that we're profiling on inside, D2 football on Sunday evenings. But you know what? They're going to be in that mix again this year, and he will be all a part of that. Now, when I go ahead, you mentioned a moment ago Mason Phillips at Mary. He's been their best player defensively for the last handful of years. The kind of guy that I have other coaches in the Northern Sun talking to me about and saying, but have you seen that guy? So he's one of those kind of players that's in that conversation. And we felt the need to recognize him. Another guy that I want to mention kind of while we're moving through all of these guys, Jacob Vance at Hillsdale. He was injured, got dinged up last year, still ended up having over double-digit tackles for loss. A Hillsdale team that I think maybe on the come up as well. We'll have to take a look at that, but there's a lot of really good athletes in this group. Chuck, I wouldn't be real surprised by the end of the year if plenty of these names play their way into first and second team on our group.
No doubt. All right, Witt, let's bring this to a close by recognizing some of the defensive backs in the Elite 100 squad team. Witt, the Minot State Beavers checking in, another program that's really trending upwards in the Northern Sun. Great to see.
Yeah, Chuck, they were kind of mired as a 2-win squad ever since they came on over into the Northern Sun in Division II back in 2012. Well, Ian Shields has done a really good job of invigorating that program. They were a 5-win squad a year ago, beat Sioux Falls, competed well with most of the rest of their conference. And teams are wondering if they're going to be the kind of group who's over 500 this year. Matter of fact, they open up at Emporia State, which will be an interesting contest right away. Now, Kevin Speed is the best defender on that group, a team that is probably heading in the direction of being a top 50 offense or defense. Now, when people think top 50 defense, there's 160 plus teams in Division II. And this is a very physical squad. And he is kind of the guy who highlights and is the backbone of that defense. Now, a few other guys I want to mention while we're here is Andrew Simpson is another guy who's getting some attention from NFL scouts. a very athletic player. He's a junior, so he's got another campaign left. Then Cam Williams was a top defender at Miles a season ago. They made a playoff run. Well, he's moved on over to Johnson C. Smith. Johnson C. Smith's got some dudes. They're reloading, Chuck. So as I kind of move through this, the last name I want to mention is a guy that we have a great deal of appreciation for. On the national champion, when we take a look at Ferris State, when you watch their defense, you cannot miss the fact that the guy in the back half, Justin Payout, is all over the place. A lot of times ends up being in a big game. You see him get a pick or a pick six. And he's a guy that we felt needed to be on our defense here. And a heck of a group of 100 players there, Chuck.
It is. That is the Elite 100 watch list team. Of course, we have our eyes on lots of players well beyond this, but it's only 100 that make the squad, which is why we do call it the Elite 100. Congratulations to all the players and all the programs that are represented. If you're kind of on that fringe where you thought maybe you might see a player out here, believe me, we're keeping an eye on you as well. And remember, this is just the watch list. So the real honors are at the end of the season. So once again, Witt, really want to thank you for all of the effort that goes into pulling this list together to recognize these players. Thank you to Josh Buchanan for his input as well. Thank you to all of the coaches who foolishly took Witt's phone calls over the spring and the summer to answer his questions. I really appreciate your input and your guidance on pulling this list together. So that is the Elite 100 watch list for 2025.
And Chuck, let's not forget that, if you have some strong thoughts about guys who weren't on this list, come get me in the comments. That's perfectly fine. But this is the list we're starting with this year, Chuck. We'll see how things end.
All right. So, Witt, if fans do want to come at you, where can they find you on a weekly basis?
Well, they're going to be able to find me going forward during our regular programming. They can go find me on the Twitter machine, of course, but let's go ahead and see some of what program are we going to offer. Well, Chuck, I'm going to be doing on Monday evenings, we will be doing MIAA Weekly. I will be having that on our socials, YouTube, all that good stuff. On Tuesdays, I will be hosting NSIC Weekly, Northern Sun. Then on Wednesdays, I'm going to be going ahead and working on GLIAC Weekly. So we're going to have that programming, Chuck. In addition, we can't forget what's our big flagship, our spot Sunday evenings, where, Chuck, I'm joining you and the rest of our group on Inside D2 Football.
August 17th will be our debut live episode. This is really our first podcast of 2025. Our first live show will be August 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern. We will unveil the D2Football.com preseason top 25. We'll go through some off-season news, membership changes, top players who may have moved in and out of the division, get you caught up on all the latest news, get you set for the season, and then we'll roll into the week 0 preview. So we are here at the start of the season, excited to start dropping the regular podcast routines each week. Of course, you mentioned some of the podcasts. We're going to have lots of columns on the website as well. So remember to hit d2football.com for all the latest news, all the latest links to columns, podcasts. We have links out there currently to all the media day info to help you get prepared for the start of the season. Remember to go out to the message board if you want to interact with other D2 football fans. Join the community, get ready for the season. And Witt, I will be seeing you on Sunday night, August 17th, live for our first episode of Inside D2 Football. Until then,
that's right.
Until then, folks, thank you for joining us. We'll see you live in the comments.